So, have you ever paid attention to how much you're not paying attention to? Like, if you thought about all the different potential subjects, topics, elements of the world, or even like just of your life, essentially, like around you that you could be exposed to, and how little of it you devote, any time and attention thinking to. There are our brains, I would say, are really good at kind of blocking out things that mean nothing. So, um, one example of this is when you're scrolling through your YouTube feed and you're like, oh, that looks boring. That looks boring. That looks boring. That looks boring. That's your brain basically saying all of those items we deem irrelevant. Therefore, we shall not have an interest in those elements and those items, and we shall not pay them any attention. You know how when you buy a new car and suddenly you see a lot of other cars on the road similar to your car, you hadn't really noticed them before. That's because your brain sees because it sees that model of car as relevant information, right? It's interesting potentially. It's been trained that there is some importance to that model of car, or it recognizes a similar pattern, right? But it is kind of remarkable, and you think about, let's say you're listening to a sermon at church or something like that, and you feel bored. Now, hopefully, not too much. Hopefully, you're not too much bored by it. But if you are bored, what are we saying? Well, boredom is, I've heard it defined as being something, if you're in a situation that you feel is predictable and confining, that will result in boredom. And so, yes, well, you should stay in church, so you're going to stay seated in the church, and you feel like it's somewhat predictable, like you're not on the edge of your seat. Is like, whoa, what is this person going to say next? You feel it's pretty predictable what they're going to say next. And not necessarily that you know exactly what they're going to say, but in terms of your brain does not have a mental note saying what this person is going to say next is most likely going to change your life, or it's going to be amazing, or whatever the case. Now contrast that to maybe some church services that you've been in, or some other speaker, and you found that their topic and the way they presented it to just be incredibly fascinating, and maybe the solution that you've been looking for a long time for this one issue. I mean, you could sit there whereas the other one, you'd be bored, for a boring sermon, you'd be bored stiff, 30 minutes would be kind of slowly dragged by, potentially. On this one, you could sit there for 2 hours, right? And you'd just be drinking it in. So it's interesting how our attention spans and our brain work. And if information that we believe to be if the brain believes information to be irrelevant, how effective it is at blocking it, either through just this sort of boredom of this almost pain, I don't want to be here experiencing this because of the boredom, or whether it's wow, this is amazing, I'm completely wrapped up in what you're saying right now. So I think the challenge, if you're a communicator, of course, is to first probably is to establish the relevance, right? It's to get people's brains turned on, to be switched on, to be either this is interesting, this is something I need, basically this is interesting, right? To get them locked in. And it's fascinating how story can be one tool to do that.